Alright, so in the last video, what we did was we set up our direct lighting system. So basically all we have is some direct lighting, and the next thing we need to do is to activate our global illumination. So let's go ahead and let's do that. Now I'm going to go ahead and select this light right here, and this light right here, and this light right there. I'm going to hit shader to open up this PPG, which is a PPG for all their common attributes. So when I make a change to say the intensity here, all the lights get updated with the same exact intensity, and so on and so forth. I'm going to go ahead and pin that PPG down. I'm going to go to the photon tab, and by checking on global illumination, I'll be turning global illumination on for all three lights at the same exact time. I need to also go to regions here, go down to all options. I'm going to pin that down too. I'm going to collapse the render region options up here, so all I have is the mental ray render options. Let's go to GI and caustics. Let's check on enable, and we got ourselves the default settings, and we want to make sure that rebuild is turned on. Now it's always going to be off by default whenever you start up XSI or create a new scene, so keep that in mind. Alright, let me collapse that just to get it out of the way. I'll collapse that to get it out of the way, and let's go to one of these camera views here, like this one for example. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use preview renders. So I'm going to go over here to preview, and I'm going to hit that. I'm going to go to options, and I'm going to choose viewport B options because we're working in viewport B. And there we go, that's what we get. We end up with photons hitting everything in our scene, but of course the result is very nasty. Now when you probably did this preview, you probably had a really big preview done with I don't know how many pixels, but 1,000 something pixels, or maybe even 2,000 pixels or something. A really big image that's probably like really huge, like this big or something, right? That's probably what happened to you by default. That's because you have to set it up at 640 by 480 like I have it as an option. Now I'm going to close that. This is getting outside the scope of this tutorial a bit, but I feel it is something that I should probably show you since I'm going to be using previews at that size. It would be unfair for me just to continue like that and ignore your pleas for help. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to render. Let's go over here to the render manager. Okay. Let's go over here to globals. Let's go to over here under scenes, and you should have an ability to change the scene output resolution down here. Actually, not you should have, you will have. Let's go to output formats. This opens up a new PPG, and you can create your own custom presets here. So when I'm over here, I can click this drop down arrow, and there's certain presets that come with XSI, like I can pick HD 1920 by 1080, 1280 by 720. I can pick PAL format for our European buddies. I can pick NTSC for everybody in the Western Hemisphere, so on and so forth. Now, this 1024 by 768 and 640 by 480 are custom ones that I created. So 640 by 480 is obviously smaller, so it's quicker to render when I'm doing previews. Hence why I went ahead and created that preset. So what we can do here is create our own presets. Let me show you how that works. With it set to custom, I'm going to go ahead and change some of these numbers around. So let me go ahead and create a custom preset for, say, 800 by 600, and it automatically typed in 600 for me because my pixel ratio is set to 1 and I have maintained picture ratio turned on. So now that I have 800 by 600, I can actually go over here and go to custom, and then I can hit save custom preset, and XSI will ask me, what do you want to name your new custom preset? So my custom is not a very original name. I'll just type in 800 by 600. Hit OK, and now it's a new preset. So if I close this window and I go over here to the scene output resolutions, voila. Now in all these presets, I also get 800 by 600. But I'm going to stick with 640 by 480. So by setting the scene output resolution to whatever output resolution you choose here, in my case 640 by 480, what's going to happen is that every time you hit a preview, it's going to come out to that size. So I'll switch over to viewport B, and We actually already saw this here with these photons. So as I said earlier, what we have here, of course, is a very nasty result. It's actually pretty reminiscent, if you remember from the early example in that cube room, the gray one that I showed you. The photons are very splotchy, very inaccurate. They look really bad, period. So let's go ahead and let's fix that. I'm going to close that window out, and let's go ahead and start tweaking our lights here. So again, I want to make sure that the colors of the photons in the lights match up. Now I'm going to take these lights and I'm going to change the color because I don't want them to be white. I'm actually going to change them to a soft bluish color. Something like this. And I'm going to copy that color like I showed you in the other video over to the global illumination color. And now what we can do is start to adjust these things. Now 10,000 photons per light, and we have 3 lights, which is going to come out to 30,000 photons in total, is not going to cut it. Let's go ahead and crank that all the way up to the max that the slider goes up to, which is 100,000. And let's do another preview. Make sure to switch it over to viewport B. So it's using viewport B's render region options. You can see down here it'll tell you the photon emission. There it is, 100%. And then it'll render the actual image out. Now that looks a whole lot better than what we had before, with the nasty splotchiness and all that stuff. Of course, we still have splotchiness, and we still don't have the most accurate result possible. So we're going to keep working with this. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do actually is something that I probably should have done before, and is create an actual sunlight, because these window lights are actually just creating this sort of ambient light that's coming in from the outside, which can be pretty bright around midday, especially if you have big open windows like this. So I'm going to go to primitive, I'm going to go to light, and this time I'm going to create an infinite light. Let me close the PPG. And the infinite light is somewhere in the middle of our scene. I'm willing to bet it's actually right there inside that couch. So I'm going to hit V for Victor to turn on the translate tool. And I'm just going to move it up out of the house or out of the apartment or whatever. And you can see it's the direction light's pointing that way, which is no good. Let me go ahead and rotate it. And I'm actually going to scale that icon up. And scaling that icon up only changes the icon. It's not going to affect the brightness of the light or the color or the shadows or anything like that. An infinite light can be scaled up or down. It's not going to make a difference. So now that I got it scaled up a bit so it's easier to see, I'm going to rotate it maybe this way, and maybe what I'm going to do is probably just rotate it downward, something like this maybe. So it's kind of like down like this. I don't know, kind of don't like that too much. Maybe something like that. So it looks more like it's midday and it's coming in from this side right into the windows. That's not too bad. And what that's going to do is it's going to create an extra light, and it's going to create hard edge shadows that's going to mimic more of sunlight coming in through. Because sunlight does tend to create these hard edge shadows in real life whenever it's a nice sunny day. Right now, obviously, the light is not creating shadows, which is a problem down here in the modify shader. And I'm going to go to general, I'm going to turn shadows on, turn the umbra all the way off. I'm going to change the color to something a little bit warm and yellowish. Not too much though, I don't want to overdo it because then we lose the realism. Just a slight amount, a very subtle effect is what it should be. And the intensity I'm actually going to increase to about 3, because sunlight around midday is pretty intense. Alright, so down here in the lower right we can see it says emitting photons. So we can see how long it's taking. And there's the actual sunlight coming in through there. And it is pretty bright. It's pretty bright. I'm going to keep it at that bright. Actually, not liking that too much. I think that's actually a bit too bright. So let me go ahead into the shader and I'm going to change that to, let's try 1. And I'm going to make the render region smaller so we render faster here. Okay, now it's rendering out, and that brightness matches up a little bit better, but it's still not bright enough. I don't like that brightness. So I'm going to actually increase that to 2, and I'm not even going to see the render region. I'm just going to leave it at 2 and close it because I'm probably going to come back later and change that anyway. Because one thing that we're going to do right now, let me actually move that infinite light up and out of the way so it doesn't just pierce right through like some kind of spear right into our scene here. Alright? Okay, next thing I want to do is I want to start to increase the intensity of the photons coming off of these lights. So good thing I have this PPG over here with all of these 3 lights parameters open, because I can change the intensity here to say something like 25,000, and it updates all 3 lights at the same time, which is obviously a very good thing. So let's do a render region real quick and see how that brightness is coming through. And FYI, changing the intensity of the photons doesn't increase rendering time, so that's good to know. And that's a little bit brighter and a lot better. Of course, we're getting a blotchy effect, but I don't mind the blotchy effect for now because we're going to fix that later. Right now I'm trying to get the overall intensity values to sort of just match up a lot better here. Let me do a preview from here. Switch over to camera viewport B. And we can see we get a much more brightly lit room. Looks a lot better this way. Looking pretty nice, pretty nice. That's pretty good. It's looking more like a nice daytime effect. We got light coming in through the windows. I like the way that the light's interacting here with the sofa, and it just drops off over here and gets darker. But we still have some light in here, which is much more realistic. Okay, not too bad, not too bad. Now we can sit here and tweak this some more, which is exactly what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and maybe we'll tweak the actual lights themselves. Now I didn't like the brightness of this light. I honestly thought it could be a lot brighter. Let me go over here. I'm going to go to the region options. I'm going to turn rebuild off because I don't want to rebuild the photon map right now. What I wanted to do instead was render this out and looking at the brightness of this light coming into this window, because I got this feeling like it should probably be a bit brighter, although that's not looking too bad. I'm actually liking that. You don't want to go too bright, because if you go too bright, say if we go over here to the general over here and go to the intensity, if we turn this intensity up, say too much to like 3,000 for example, now it gets too bright. Now it's just blown out. It looks like a nuclear warhead just went off a few miles away, and in a flash of a second it's going to pretty much disintegrate everything. Let's go to 1500. 1000 looked good, but it kind of looked like overcast skies, and I'm trying to go more for that midday kind of look. Something more like this I think looks maybe a little bit better, although there's nothing wrong with an overcast sky kind of look. I'm going to leave it at 1500 for now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some render regions of these other areas and see how they got affected by doing the intensity change of the light. And I'm actually liking this part over here. This part's looking pretty good. I love the way that the light is hitting this part of the sofa right there, and then it falls off, the lighting. That's why light fall off is so important. I love the way the light's hitting this part of the sofa over here and this part of the cushion right there. And of course the floor right here is getting blown out a little bit, which I'm actually liking because it's mimicking more that midday sun kind of look. Okay, that's not looking too bad. How about a render from this area over here? And this may seem tedious, but it's extremely important for you to render out different previews from different angles of your scene. And the reason that is because if you don't do it, you're going to learn this the hard way. So you might as well just take my word for it and just basically do what I say. But when you're working on stuff like this that takes so long to tweak and to get right, you have to do different test renders from different angles to get the look of the lighting that you want. If not, what's going to happen is you're going to adjust the lighting to cater to a certain angle, like let's say just this angle, and then when you switch over to another angle, like say, I don't know, maybe this one over here, some part of the lighting may not look right, and then you just wasted hours tweaking the lighting to fit the other angle, and it turns out it doesn't fit all the angles just right. So it's important to have different angles of your scene ready to go so that you can go ahead and view them, and using these camera memory options up here are perfect for that. So I'm liking the way this is looking from pretty much every angle, at least every angle that I've seen so far, which is only 4 angles really. Let me go ahead and do a render region because I haven't seen it from this side over here. Okay, I'm actually liking that. That doesn't look too bad. Again, we could probably get a little bit more accurate result if we put 3 lights right there instead of 1 for that entire window, or even 2 lights for that entire window. But then we're going to increase rendering time, and I want to go ahead and render this out as quickly as possible. If you want to, you can go ahead and create 2 of these lights here. So have one take up half and the other one take up the other half. But I'm going to go ahead with one. One's going to be just fine for me. Alright, so that's not looking too bad. The intensity of the photons, to be honest with you, is pretty much dead on. 25,000 looks like the magic number in this case. And yeah, we have to keep in mind that every scene is specific. Every scene is different. This scene might look good with an intensity of 25,000 for the photons. Another scene you work on might need more or might need less. So every scene is different. There's no magic formula to getting this right. That's the thing that scares a lot of people about mental ray, is because there's no magic button that says render now and tick, it just goes ahead and renders it beautifully for you. That just doesn't happen. So the number of photons is killing us right now in terms of quality. So now that I have the intensities of my light set up exactly how I want, my photon intensity is good, my spotlight intensity is good. The only thing actually that I still needed to change was this light over here, this infinite light. I don't like it's coming in too much of an angle right there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn, oh, rebuild's already off, perfect. Okay, let's do a render region right down here. And there's our nice sunlight coming in through the windows. Perfect. That looks great. I like that. Now it's a little bit blown out there, but that's okay. Because in real life that really would be that blown out if it's midday sun and it's coming into those windows at that angle. Especially considering the shades are open. Now I did make a mistake earlier and I'm glad I caught this mistake. And I'm not going to edit this out of the video. I mean, we're all human. We all make mistakes. But I'm glad I caught it so I can show you what I did wrong. Earlier when I increased my intensity to 25,000 for the photons, I forgot to turn on the rebuild function. By doing that, I got the same intensity that I had before at 10,000. So when I thought that I had increased it and it looked good, I actually tricked myself. I was actually looking at an intensity of 10,000 and not 25,000. So now that I'm going to go ahead and turn rebuild on, I'm going to get a totally different result here. Now it might be good or it might be bad, but let's go ahead and do a test render. Viewport B region options is what you want to go ahead and choose. It's emitting the photons now. And here we go. Let's check that intensity right there, the brightness of the photons. Make sure it didn't make the scene too bright. And it actually didn't make the scene too bright. So it didn't blow it out of proportion and it didn't make it look too bright and unrealistic. Let's switch to camera view. Again, very important that we see preview renders from different angles. Extremely important and vital to the rendering process. A good render artist is going to have a look at his scene from good angles and many angles. There's our sofa being nicely lit up by the outside environment. The entire room is being lit up by the photons. I'm liking the intensity of the photons. They look good. Let's check out our third angle here. And I'm making another mistake. I could render this out faster if I turn the rebuild option off, because right now I'm not making changes to the photon map anyway, so there's really no reason to keep rebuilding the photon map over and over again. So as soon as it finishes this one, I'm going to turn rebuild off. Okay, so you can see how the lighting very nicely gets underneath the furniture there, and without global illumination we would just have these harsh, nasty shadows, and anywhere where there's shadows would be pitch black. So you can imagine how bad it would be if mental ray didn't exist and we didn't have this global illumination. Okay, so I went ahead and froze the global illumination map by turning the rebuild option off in the render region settings. So now when we switch angles we render out a lot faster because there's no global illumination process being calculated. Now I'm letting you see the render process for now on purpose so you can see what's happening and you can get an idea of the workflow and the amount of time that goes into doing things like this, because you have to sit here and do all these test renders. From now on though, what I'm going to be doing is skipping the video ahead every time I render, so you don't have to sit there and watch the rendering times every single time. So we'll use the magic of video editing to speed up our renders and make them instant. Someday everyone will have a supercomputer in their home and you'll be able to render stuff out like this very quickly. Okay, so I'm liking all these angles. It's looking good from every single angle. Yeah, that's the same angle right there, so let me close that down. Okay, now that we have the global illumination effect looking good in terms of the color and the intensity and all that, the last thing that I want to do is finally tweak the effect so that it looks really, really good, because right now it looks blotchy nasty. So I'm going to go ahead and increase my GI accuracy to maybe 2048. I think it's going to work out pretty good. And I'm also going to change the number of photons on all three of these lights. 100,000 is a very small number. And that comes out to a grand total of about 300,000 in the entire scene, of course, because 100,000 times 3 is 300K, 300,000. Now, remember when I said earlier in another video that when you're working on projects like this, you're going to want to work with very, very large numbers. So we're going to do that. You also remember that earlier in the first example of global illumination, I told you that you should never use an accuracy search radius that's really, really high. You don't want to do that because that's going to mess up the accuracy of the scene. Now, if you don't believe me, now I'm going to show you what happens when you do that. Let's turn this search radius all the way up to 20. Watch this. This is going to be horrible. I'm going to go over here to preview, options, viewport B, and I turned on the rebuild option, of course, because I need to rebuild the photon map. Okay, like I said, I was going to start skipping ahead and render so you don't have to see them. And this is what we've got. As you notice, all the splotchiness is gone completely because my search radius is so high. But you're also going to notice there's a problem with this scene. Now, at first glance, and especially to a beginner, it may not look like there's a problem. But if we look over this carefully, we notice there's something really weird going on with the lighting here. Our global illumination is inaccurate right now because we use such a large radius. So what do I mean by accurate? Well, have a look between the cushions in here, and also have a look on the top of the cushions. Notice something strange? The image is sort of giving us this feel like there's this strange light right above our sofa here. Like there was a light fixture turned on right here on the ceiling above the sofa. Now, I'll tell you right now, there is no light above the sofa. There is none. The only lights in the scene are the lights at the windows, the infinite light that's outside acting like sunlight, and of course the photons. But despite the fact we have some light fixtures on these ceilings, those light fixtures are turned off. I mean, it's daytime. Who wastes that much power needlessly? Since there's no lights on, why in the world are we getting light above this sofa? Also, how come there's so much light underneath the sofa? See that? If you look underneath, it doesn't get darker. It's just as bright underneath as it is over here in the area where all the light's hitting. So there's obviously something very, very wrong going on here with this scene. The light is not being calculated correctly. That's called accuracy, and the global illumination is not being calculated very accurately right now. So let me go ahead and render from another angle. Okay, so here we can see more of that effect going on, and it's pretty dramatic over here. If you look underneath the couch, what we have is, well, essentially, there's no shadowing down here. It's as bright underneath the couch as it is over here in this open area. That obviously is completely wrong and not accurate at all. So let's have a look at another angle. Okay, again, we can see back here in this part of the couch, although this may appear to be normal, it's actually not. The couch almost seems like it's glowing back here, just a slight amount, almost like if we had turned on the global ambience. And you can see more of that effect over here with the pillow. The pillow is getting the same color as the actual arm here, the armrest of the couch itself, which is completely wrong and completely inaccurate. So you don't want to use large radius values. I think I've pleaded my case. And I think you start to see that it makes perfect sense not to use a large radius. Yeah, it's good because it gets rid of the blotchiness in big open areas like this wall back here. But in exchange, you're getting hurt because you lose that lighting accuracy, which is not good. So let's go down to, say, 2.5, which is default, and we're going to get a more accurate global illumination calculation here. and we only have 100,000 photons per light, so we have 300K in our scene in total. I turned on rebuild just to make sure that it rebuilds the photon map, and I'm going to turn on preview here. Let's go to viewport B. Okay, now we rendered out using a radius of only 2.5, which is much more accurate. And we'll notice it's a lot more accurate because we could see the dark areas here between the cushions are more realistic. They're darker and react to the light a lot better. Also, underneath the couch, it actually looks a lot darker now, and you can especially see it right here and even far away back over there. Even in a poor quality image like this at only 640 by 480, we can see a huge difference. And if you do a comparison with the other image from before, you notice that the shelves back here on the wall that have these picture frames and knickknacks and things are actually darker now, and they're lit more physically accurate than they were when we used a search radius of 20. So I think it's a no-brainer, and you can clearly see right now that using a large radius is a bad idea, and you don't want to do it. Okay, the problem now is that we get a lot of blotching. Now, if you remember from the first example of global illumination with that gray room with the skylight, I told you that to get that blotchiness gone, you're going to have to introduce a lot more photons. Now, when I say a lot, I mean a lot. So 100,000 per light is not going to cut it. Let's up that all the way up to 1 million. That's 1 and 6 zeros, my friend. Okay. Now, I'm set to rebuild. Now you can see down here it's emitting photons. Look how slow that's going. That is going very slow. It's 14%, 15, 16, 17. That's taking a long time. That's 3 million photons. Let me skip ahead so you don't have to watch this. Okay, so I finally finished rendering. It took a good couple of minutes, and we end up with a much better result. Now that we're using, instead of 300,000, 3 million photons is what we're using, a lot of the blotchiness in these walls went away. Now we can still see blotchiness on this white wall over here, which is a clear indicator of, guess what? That's right, we need a lot more photons. 3 million is still too few photons to use. So, if 3 million is not going to cut it, how about we double it to 6 million? Let's go ahead for the light here, and we're going to go ahead and put in 3 million photons instead. 3 and 6 zeros. Now this is going to take much longer to render, so I'm not even going to show you. Look how slow that bar is moving. That's just to calculate the photons. So I'm going to skip the video ahead so you don't have to watch this. Okay, after a pretty long time, actually not too long, it took about, I don't know, 5-6 minutes to render out the photon illumination. It finally finished and gave me this result, which is pretty good. I mean, besides the obvious aliasing that's going on here, it got rid of most of the blotchiness. Now if we look carefully, there's still some blotchiness over here, so we can get rid of that one of two ways: the hard way or the easy way, and we could cheat. Now the hard way is to go ahead and add more photons. So instead of 3 million photons per light, upping that to maybe 5 million photons per light. Maybe even 6 million photons per light, which is, going to give us 18 million photons. Now, depending on your hardware, your computer may crash at that point, or you may even crash XSI or mental ray and not be able to render it out. So hardware is really important. Make sure if you're going to become a render artist, or you already are a render artist and you're trying to get better, that you go ahead and invest some money, or have your studio, hint hint, invest some money into getting you a better computer with better hardware. One of the myths that goes around, and I really don't know who started this myth, something about that video cards render faster. That's not true. I don't know who started that myth. Mental ray does not render faster if you have a $2,000 video card. It's just not true. It's a myth. The truth is that the things that determine your rendering speed is your computer's hardware in terms of your processor. So you want to make sure you have a good processor and plenty of them, because mental ray does parallel processing, where it can render faster if you have more processors. So if you have a single processor, you're going to be rendering real slow, and it doesn't matter if you have a $10,000 video card, you're still going to render just as slow as everybody else. If you have a dual core processor, you're going to render, depending on the processor, you can render up to twice as fast. If you have a dual core, dual processor machine, now you're going to be rendering real fast. And if you have, of course, a quad processor machine, you're going to be rendering really fast. And of course, your system memory is also important. Make sure you have plenty of memory. Anything over 2 gigs, I recommend. Anything lower than 2 gigs, I do not recommend. And make sure you have fast and good quality memory. Again, video cards are not going to make a difference at all. So if you go out and buy a $2,000 video card and then find out the hard way that it doesn't speed up rendering, not even by 1 second, don't be mad later. I warned you. Okay, so we're not going to add more photons to this. We're going to take option B and cheat and do this the fast way. And option B is to come in here and change our photon search radius. Now in another video, remember I said that you should never go over 5. That's my personal preference setting. Over the years, I have found that yields very good accurate results, but it lets you cheat a little bit on rendering time and get things out the door faster. So what I'm going to do is change that radius to 5. Remember, I said if you go to 5 or lower, you're going to be good to go. Anything higher and you start to really lose your accuracy. Now, let me go ahead and close that. Very important, turn rebuild back on. Now we're going to rebuild a, what is that, 3 million photons per 3 lights. No, actually we were using 2 million, weren't we? Or is it 3 million? Yeah, it doesn't matter. I'll stick with 3 million. 3 million will be fine. Actually, let's change that to 2 million. I think 2 million is going to render just fine. I really don't think we need 3 million. It's just added rendering time. So we're going to use 2 million photons. So we're dropping our photons down. And we're also going to increase our radius, which makes us lose some accuracy but gain rendering speed. But fortunately, a setting of 5 is still pretty good. So let me go ahead and make sure rebuild is on. And let's do a preview again. So we'll go down here to preview, switch over to viewport B options. And it's going to take a while to emit photons because 2 million is still a pretty large number. So let's skip ahead. Okay, that finally finished rendering after about 100 years. But we can see that, of course, besides the obvious aliasing we have here in the jagged edges, the global illumination effect looks great. There's no blotching here on the sofa, no blotching on our walls, and everything looks fantastic. And we still retained accuracy because we can see the shadowing between the cushions. We can also see the shadowing, the slight shadowing underneath the couch, which looks a lot more realistic than that other time when we used a search radius of 20, which was pretty ridiculous. But this looks pretty good. Now let me go up here and I'm going to turn rebuild off. Now, let's go ahead and have a look at this. Let me collapse that, get out of the way. Let's have a look at this from different camera angles. And it's so awesome how you could turn rebuild off so that you can do things like this, change your camera angles and not have to rebuild your photon map. Can you imagine if every time we changed any setting or camera angle or anything, we had to rebuild a 2 million photon map all over again every time? Now imagine if you were working with, say, 12 million photons. That'd be pretty crazy. So there's a nice shadowing underneath the couch. The couches have this nice shadowing going on between the cushions, as opposed to before when we had a strange mysterious omni light on top that was lighting everything up. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now the last step to making this look good is to go ahead and fix our anti-aliasing issues. So let me go ahead and close that. Let me go to the region options here. Let me go to optimization. Actually, I'm going to go to rendering. They switched it on me in exercise 6. Okay, right now we're set to -3 and -1, which is, ew, that's horrible. Those are not production settings, but they're perfect for doing the previews we were doing. Now what we're going to do is we're going to increase that. So let's go ahead and knock this up to, say, 3 and 1. And let's change our threshold values. I think we'll be fine with something like 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, and 0.1. 1 and 3 is going to take a while to render, so we are going to tag on some extra rendering time. Of course, the render is going to come out a lot better, a lot more higher quality, which of course is good. So let me collapse that out of the way. Let me go over here to preview, and let's go over here to options. I'm going to go to viewport B options, and just to show you here, it's pre-processing right now. I believe I turned rebuild off. I should have, and I did. Good i3D check, good boy. Okay, so now it's just doing the render. It's not calculating the map. Now you can see it's taken a very long time to render this. It's just taking its sweet old time, but fortunately it's doing it for good reason, to give us a nice high quality render. So I'm going to go ahead and skip this, and we'll come back to it when it's finished rendering. Alright, so there we have it. The render's done, and the anti-aliasing has kicked in. We get a nice smooth render with no artifact, and you can tell that that's an actual nice ceiling there. And the sofa looks nice and clean. The lighting's accurate. The search radius, the radius for the global illumination is actually pretty good. So that's it. It's done. I'm not going to go ahead and render all the other angles out because it really would take extra time to render, and you can go ahead and do that on your own. When you have time, just go in there and render out the other views and see how it is. So that's how it's done. That's how you can use global illumination to light up a scene realistically if you're doing architectural visualization, or if you're doing any other projects. It's there. It's there in Mental Ray for XSI. Use it to your advantage. Use it whenever you can. Take advantage of it. It's a great rendering technique to use, and an awesome feature, just one of the many weapons in Mental Ray's arsenals. So that does it for global illumination, and in the next video we're just going to go ahead and we're going to start working on another subject. We're going to work on final gather, which is another way of simulating indirect illumination with using Mental Ray and XSI, and we're going to see how that feature works, and that's a pretty awesome feature as well. I'm sure you'll like the next videos, and I'll see you there.